Hey everybody, it's Brian Coley, the Movie Whisperer. This is a place where we look at the intersection of our movies with our story. For the last few videos, we've been looking at the concept of the box office in relationship to the Oscars. And my premise is that I believe that the Oscars tell us where we're headed, and that the Oscars tell us, the box office tells us where we are and where we've been. There has been one exception to that, and that has been Disney. And that's what we've been looking at the last couple of videos, is to see how Disney has both been a studio that seems to be amplifying the themes of the Oscars, just perfect timing as far as themes that come out in the Oscars. And then right after that is a Disney movie that amplifies that theme, or they are predecessors to the Oscars, that they are actually telling us our story way before even the Oscars tell us our story. And so that has been what we've been looking at the last couple of videos. I'd encourage you to go back and look at them if you're interested in this subject. But we're going to pick up where we left off, and that is in the 2019 Oscars. Whoa, there they are. Come on back. 2019 Oscars. So this is the palette of films that I looked at and analyzed in 2019 as far as Oscar Best Picture nominees. And what I saw in this film was these films were a whole lot of power struggle. You see a lot of power struggle. I'd love to break this down at another time to show you all the evidence of this, but ultimately is like breaking down borders of power and ultimately letting power be distributed. Now, the movie that I think about most when I think about this theme is Black Panther. I mean, Black Panther was so significant culturally. You talk about a movie that was such a cultural moment in which I believe it was speaking themes that we needed to have conversations about for years to come, and we would ultimately. So I really do believe it was a predecessor as far as America talking about race. But I want to look at it through the lens of power distribution and how it played into this Oscar palette. So once again, a movie that Disney has released is released way before the Oscars. So this movie came out actually in the winter of 2018, where most Oscar films come out in the fall or right up to December. But Black Panther was released way before that. And already it was talking about the distribution of power. And so if you know the plot of the movie, you know that there's a king whose name is T'Challa. And T'Challa is the king over a country called Wakanda. And Wakanda is this special place where they have this source of power, which is a power source to his suit as Black Panther, which is called vibranium. And vibranium is this special, superpower source. And ultimately, if you know the movie, there's a shakeup in the kingdom, almost in a Shakespearean way, where Killmonger is this character who comes in and wants to take the throne and take over this power. And the motivation behind Killmonger is he wants vibranium to get out into the world. Now, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, T'Challa realizes that it is true that vibranium needs to get out into the world. And so eventually Wakanda opens its door and allows the globe and the earth to share in the spoils of all the technology advances it's had through this power source of vibranium. So that's Black Panther. And again, it's happening way before the Oscars. It happens to be a part of this Oscar palette that happens in 2019. But I also want to take you back a little bit before that. We talked about this in the last episode. We talked about a movie that was called The Last Jedi. And so The Last Jedi, I think, is very significant, again, as a movie that was talking about power distribution even before these Oscars and even before Black Panther. So Last Jedi is 2017, about December. Again, timing is so important in all this. And so here is a movie that we talked about before. We talked about it being a predecessor to what would happen in 2018 about looking at women taking agency. And so we talked about in the last episode about how Rey was this woman who is taking agency as a Jedi and becoming a change agent, which was playing into a lot of 2018's Oscar themes of women taking agency. So yes, it was a predecessor for those themes, but I think this movie was even more significant than that this movie was significant because of, through the lens of power distribution, it was about Luke Skywalker. This is a spoiler alert. Luke Skywalker dying. Ultimately, you have this character who is this icon of of where power and where wisdom, all wisdom and power is in the Jedi. And he's like the last Jedi. Ultimately, what happens? He goes away, he dies and sacrifices his life. And so, sorry, did I say spoiler alert on that one? So to me, this was hugely significant. When this happened, I was like, wow, this is a moment. Something's going on that's playing into where we are in our story. So I want to talk about our story as a culture and how this idea of power distribution plays in. Now, this is the moment, which I know I'm probably going to trigger a lot of people, and I'm not trying to do that at all. In fact, what I'm going to say, I am an old white male. So I'm saying this to myself in a lot of ways. But as far as our culture and as far as our story and as far as our history as a country, power has been held up in one place for a very long time. And that has been primarily with white male dominance. That we have been, I as a white male have been a benefactor of power being held up in one place. And I believe, as far as our culture story right now, that we're in a seismic shift in which power is being distributed. And that ultimately this sort of idea of the Last Jedi, sort of that idea of Obi-Wan Kenobi, of there's this old white male who has all this power and all this wisdom and that is held up in one place. That idea, I believe, is going away. Now, make sure you don't hear me say this. I am not saying that it needs to be the death of white males or white males need to go away. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, as a person of faith, I believe this is such a significant time because as a person of faith, I believe God means for the table to be wider. I believe he's an inclusive God. And I believe he doesn't like when power is held up in one place. So I believe we're in a seismic shift right now that is ultimately a work of God of distributing power to the other people. In fact, to go back to Black Panther, really, I think what's happening culturally is that vibranium, which has been held up in this one place like Wakanda, only Wakanda is really, white male dominance. I believe it's now we're realizing it needs to be distributed and beyond our borders and beyond the borders of just this one place where it's held up. So I just want to show this because I think Disney and Marvel, I don't know, I'd love to talk to the Disney and Marvel executives and say, is this what you had in mind when you made this movie? Did you know that this was going to play out so significantly with an era of Trump, an era in which we had a Capitol siege in which all these white males were like, we've got to hold on to power? Like, did you know that this would be timed so significantly? And probably they didn't, because once again, I could sort of see this as a work of God within our story as a country. So, but I do want to just, once again, just say that I believe Disney was ahead of even the Oscars in 2019 of looking at this idea of power distribution. Now, finally, I want to come to what I've been kind of teasing for a long time in these videos, is looking at this year. This year, I'm analyzing the Oscars for this year, and here's the nominees again for this year's Oscars, looking at what they tell us about our story and where we're headed as a country. Like, what are some of the themes that are coming out? And once again, Disney and Marvel are ahead of the game. And they're ahead with a little show that is called WandaVision. Now, WandaVision is pretty significant because ultimately, WandaVision is dealing with the theme of grief and loss. Now, if you think of 2020 and where we've been in 2020, the biggest thing that we need to unpack moving forward, we need to unpack what we've lost. And we need to unpack our grief. And in the nominees this year, you're going to see, as we unpack these going forward, you're going to see a lot of themes around how do we unpack this idea of grief and loss. But WandaVision, once again, was there first. And so you have the story of Wanda, who is dealing with the loss and grief of Vision, the guy she loved. And so she creates this place, which is going to be significant when we talk about the 2021 Oscar nominees, the idea of place. She creates this place to grieve. And there's even a really significant moment where she has the title of this deed where this house was that Vision gave her. And she's dealing so much with her grief that she creates this massive, explosion of her grief. And I just think that this is just incredible that once again, Disney Marvel is just right there in the middle of our culture story saying, okay, we need to deal with our grief. And how are we going to deal with our grief as a country in light of this pandemic and what all we've lost of jobs and lifestyle and people that we love. So hopefully this is encouraging. In my mind, I never want to have the Oscars be like tea leaves. I'm not trying to read the tea leaves at all. Instead, I'm not trying to figure out what is our future and fortune telling or anything like that. I just believe that if we can pay attention to our artist and we can pay attention to and realize that the artists usually have a little bit of a inspiration that comes just through artistry of telling our stories, and how our movies do somehow intersect with our stories in some way, that we can actually learn from that and affirm where the themes of where we might be headed as far as what we need to wrestle with. So I'm excited to explore the 2021 Oscars nominees moving forward. We're going to kind of go off this Disney rant that I've gone on, but I really love the fact, and I would love to sit down with Disney executives or Marvel executives and say, let's talk about how you guys have been so well timed. What were you thinking whenever you made these movies? But hopefully this gives you a little bit of idea of how Disney has a little special magic. And so thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Movie Whisperer.